Hi, everyone, and welcome to this episode of CloudTalent360.com. This is a series where we talk with leaders in the Salesforce consulting community throughout the world and ask them what inspired them to be an entrepreneur, to start, and the journey they had to start being an entrepreneur, and then all the way to having a successful Salesforce consulting company. And we also talk to them about their best advice for your career path. How can you have a successful career as a Salesforce employee or consultant? So my name is Jason. I'm one of the co-founders of Cloud Talent, and I'm here with...
I'm Martin Gessner. I'm also a co-founder of Cloud Talent and the founder of FocusOnForce.com.
And just to give a little bit of background, we do about 400 interviews per month. So we've had a lot of interviews with people, gotten feedback from the employer on what they liked, didn't like, and Cloud Talent's here to help you manage your career as well as help you find a job if you're looking for your next move in the Salesforce ecosystem. So today I'm very excited to introduce our guest, Ajay Dubedi, out of Uttar Pradesh, India. So welcome to the show, Ajay.
Thanks, Jay. Thanks, Martin. Thanks for inviting me in this awesome show. So yeah, let's get started.
Yeah, great. So I just want to start really. You're the CEO and founder of Cloud Anaogy and cloudanalogy.com, and we're going to talk about Cloud Anaogy in part two. We're going to get into what is Cloud Anaogy as a consulting firm, how does it differentiate itself, all those interesting questions. And in part three, Ajay will give his advice and his insights, practical advice to you who are listening about your your Cloud Talent careers and your Salesforce careers. I really would like to know a little bit about your journey, Ajay. Let's go back to the beginning where this entrepreneurship started. Can you share with our audience the first entrepreneurial project or the first thing you did that was entrepreneurial when you're in high school or university? How did it start?
So yeah, absolutely, Jay. So let's get into the beginning part. So definitely, I started my entrepreneurial experience right when I was in college, and it was like my third year. And what we did, in fact, me and some of my really talented friends, we started a business called Web India Development. So it was basically it was more towards website development and web components development. So it was all based on PHP and HTML and JavaScript based website developments with some fancy, at that time it was more back in 2008-ish. Yeah. So at that time it was more like a recession time was going away, or it was like the world of business, you would say, was coming back on track. So we were able to get some good projects, and as college goers, it was good to have some practical experience out of those particular projects.
To just start that out, right? So you're in university, and in university, which university were you at the time?
So I was in UPTU. Okay, so okay. It's Uttar Pradesh Technical University.
Okay, great. So you're in university, and most people are very busy with their classes, having their social life, and just kind of enjoying their university years. And what I think is interesting is that you, in addition to all of that going on, you hadn't even graduated yet. And you got together with some friends and started your entrepreneurial, your spark, you got into and started creating your first, consulting and effort, really. And it was in web development. You said it had to do with PHP, web development, things like that. Pretty cool. And you're coming out of a recession. At that time, right, the world was coming out of a recession. So in fact, not only did you have to learn the technical side, but you had to deal with the fact that the world was coming out of the recession. So when you were doing that project, just to kind of really understand a little bit, what do you think was the hardest thing for you to get started in your first entrepreneur? What was the challenge? What was the difficult thing you faced at that time?
So to answer that question, I would like to give a bit of background as well. Like during my school days back when I was in school, before my college time, I was a very good programmer already. So, and at that time, it was pretty rare to get some programming studies. So initially, I started with QBasic and Fox Pro and C and C++. So those programming languages always sort of fascinated me, and it was more like playing chess. Okay, so you need to strategize all your steps and moves and everything. So I was always fascinated with this exact question, like how and who is going to pay me for my 4 lines of code, or like 40 lines of code, or 10,000 lines of code. So that curiosity always led me into sort of trying myself out and trying to speak to the world, like, okay, where we can push this business logic, which can be done into a programming way, and how it can be done. So
And you were just 18 or 19 years old at that time when you were doing this? Yeah. Okay,
yes,
great.
yes.
So just to summarize for the audience, I mean, I think that's a great, really a wonderful, interesting story, because number one, just to summarize in this part, you know, you're in university, the world's coming out of recession, and you have really kind of the mind to do programming. You enjoy it, and it's a passion. But even at that very early stage, what makes you a little different is the fact that you're curious. Who's going to pay me for this? And you know, it's not just the pure joy of programming. You already at that very early stage were trying to connect the dots with, how does this whole business thing work? How do you get clients? How do you get paid for this? And I think as a very young man in university, most people don't ask those types of questions, especially the ones that are excellent at programming. So I think that's a great place to sort of just, you know, start the show. People can get to know your spirit a little bit, you know, university student, and we start the journey there. And we'll be back and talk about where is AJ now in terms of Cloud Anaogy, what he's built, what kind of customers he serves, and you know, to see that where it's taken him, that spark, that real curiosity about how to translate what he's learning technically into value for customers. So we'll be back right after the break with part 2, where Martin and AJ will talk about Cloud Anaogy, AJ's successful Salesforce consulting firm. So see you right after the break. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to part 2 of CloudTalent360.com. This is Jason. I'm here with Martin Gessner, and our guest today, Ajay Dubedi. He is the CEO of Cloud Anaogy. And in part 1, we got to know AJ's background, where he started his entrepreneurial spark. Way back in university, you know, we learned that he was a gifted programmer, but he was very interested in how do you actually share this value that a programmer has with customers. So even as a university student, he started his first business, got out there, started talking to customers, and was very curious about customer value. And in part 2, we're going to talk about now what he's built, what he's created, and his consulting firm, Cloud Anaogy. And so what's its mission? Who does it serve? How big is it? And in part 3, don't forget, we're going to come back and get AJ's insight for your career path, how to have a great career in the Salesforce ecosystem. So I'm going to head it over now for part 2 to my co-host, Martin Gessner.
So AJ, let's start. I'm really curious to find out a little bit more about Cloud Anaogy. So in a few sentences, how would you describe what Cloud Anaogy does, and how is it unique and different to other consulting companies?
Definitely. So at Cloud Anaogy, we help understand and leverage CRM. So it becomes easy for them to identify opportunities, explore new markets, mitigate risk, and increase operational effectiveness. So when a particular client works with Cloud Anaogy, they join thousands of happy and satisfied customers from all parts of the world. And overall, we work not only with Salesforce CRM, we work with multiple different CRMs as well.
Right. Okay. So that's interesting. So you're not just dedicated on the Salesforce platform. You have a wider view of CRM solutions. But obviously Salesforce is a big part of your business. Can you tell us a little bit more about the industries or the type of companies that you work with?
Yeah, definitely. So predominantly we work in financial domain, and we have worked with multiple different banks and insurance based companies. We have helped them set up their loan management systems as a CRM, and as multiple insurance management systems. Other than banking and finance domain, we also work in real estate, healthcare, and education domains, equally in a in same parts. So yeah.
Right. Okay. And how is the size of the team? How many people do you have, and what types of roles do you have at the moment?
So today, Cloud Anaogy has offices in United States, India, Australia, and United Kingdom. Our team is 175 plus, so in that range. And we have Salesforce administrators, consultants, developers have helped us deliver more than 250 projects in the span of just 5 years. Our India team is having the entire delivery system, like the delivery team in it.
Right. Okay. And do you offer products as well as services?
The products which we offer is pin tags is one of our good products, which is sort of a utility tool, and it helps any Salesforce user to actually get into their record management and tagging them into groups and categories. So that is one of our paid products. Other than that, we have applications like drag and drop, which are helping like all the communities free of cost. Obviously, companies like Honeywell's and Virgin Australia, they are using this particular app to manage, upload files and attachments into Salesforce in a much better way than out-of-box Salesforce provides. So apart from these two products, we also have multiple different products. I would definitely love you all to go ahead and have a look at them.
Okay, that's interesting. I think because it's a challenge to run both a product company and a services company at the same time. So how have you sort of overcome that challenge?
So yeah, you are absolutely right. There is in a particular in a true entrepreneur, there is always a niche and an idea of taking a concept or a problem and converting it into a product. Okay, so like we or I individually had so many this kind of ideas almost every day, but it is truly possible when you are able to take one of them and work on it dedicatedly, like focus on it and take it through that entire process of development and go to market. Okay, so we have multiple ideas. I have worked on multiple ideas, but those are the few products which we were able to take to market and make a success out of it. And working parallelly on services is a huge different challenge, because services is like every day a new problem. Okay, and probably the same problem in a different domain. So services is, I would say, like services is a difficult ball of game as compared to product.
Right. And I think you know, a lot of people are in the same situation. They have a lot of ideas, or they might have developed a solution as part of a service, and then they think, well, this could be reused in the industry, and this really could become a product. But the challenge, you know, I believe is that, you know, it's about how do you balance your resources and how do you actually structure your resources, because you don't want your consulting resources to be distracted by, you know, building or supporting a product. So it's kind of important probably that you've got separate teams, and like you said, you know, you really need to, you know, you need to prioritize where you spend your resources as well, because each product really has its own sort of life and it needs its own team, and, you know, to support it and develop it and market it. So it's an interesting challenge. I think I've seen a lot of examples where consulting companies, they really have developed a solution that could apply to the whole industry, but they need to decide really, are they going to spend effort on this or not? Are they a product company or are they a service company?
Yep, and I truly agree. Like the decision is how much energy you want to invest in which part. Okay,
Wow.
so from a service point of view, we definitely have won multiple awards. Like recently, we got to become Salesforce Silver Consulting Partner. We've got awarded by Clutch as well as IT services industry in 2019 Global Leaders Award, and multiple different awards. Now that takes a lot of dedication in from the approach of getting a CRM based problems, solving it out. But from a product point, it is more about how many licenses you are able to generate or like close. And the same product can be applicable to many different domains. Okay, so you need to identify like, okay, this particular product will fit into healthcare industry. This is going to fit in X and Y and Z, and there are obviously limited number of the different industries, and you are preparing something beforehand. But services is like, you don't know what is going to come to you, right? And you are still prepared for it.
Right. And I guess there's pros and cons of each business model. A successful product company maybe will have more stable revenue, and a services company is going to perhaps have some ups and downs depending on the projects. So I think it's it's very impressive that you are able to grow your company up to the size that it is, and also balance both products and services.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, well, that's it for the second part of the show. And in this part, just to summarize quickly, one of the things I thought was great is that we learned about Cloud Anaogy and the mission, and also just the breadth of it. And one of the most interesting things that Martin and AJ shared with us was the balance between both products and services, and how they take almost different muscles. You have to develop different muscles. A whole different way of thinking. And we're going to talk a little bit now in part 3. We'll come back in a moment and talk to AJ about Salesforce career paths. What are the key things he's learned? He's got 175 people working for him at his firm, and obviously lots of people interview. And so he has some really good insights on what makes somebody successful during the interview and what makes them successful in their first few months, what he's looking for to manage your Salesforce career. So we'll take a short break, and we'll be back with you in part 3 right after this break. Hi everyone, welcome back. This is cloudtalent360.com, the show where we bring you interviews with leaders in Salesforce. Today we're here with Ajay Dubedi, who is the CEO of a consulting firm with 175 people around the world, offices in the US, offices in the UK, office in India. And Cloud Anaogy has developed products. They're on AppExchange. They've also, handle a breadth. In part 2, we learned a breadth of services for financial and for other industries too. So welcome back to the show today, AJ.
Thank you.
Okay, so now in part 3, this is the part that a lot of people are interested in, okay, which is starting with your journey way back in university, your first spark, to the amazing firm you've built now, Cloud Anaogy, with 175 people in part 2. Now we're going to talk about, you've got 175 people working for you around the world. You've built a successful enterprise. People are curious, as you're going through all the people you're interviewing, as you're managing people. We're going to break down what you've learned that they can benefit from to manage their Salesforce careers, okay, and their cloud talent careers. So let's start with the very first question, which is when you're looking at hiring somebody, let's just start in the technical role, okay? What is the first thing that you're looking for when they apply? Say somebody's applying to your HR staff. What do you tell your HR staff? Give me the people whose CVs, and let's start with somebody who's right out of the first training in Salesforce. Do you work with people who've just recently graduated from their first Salesforce?
Yeah.
You do? Okay.
Yep.
So somebody's just graduated from Salesforce, this first certification, and what are you looking for in that they just recently graduated? I just recently got my first certification. So how does somebody apply, and what is your HR team looking for in that freshly available Salesforce person? What are the 2 or 3 things you like to see?
Definitely, Jay. And this is one question which I would be the best person to answer, because I take interviews even now. So I take both technical and non-technical interviews, and I participate in like almost majority of the hiring process. And the biggest question I want to ask, or to say like understand from anyone, especially a newbie who is into Salesforce or this particular CRM domain, is problem solving. So that is the key thing. And I always come up with different kind of puzzles, okay? And most of the puzzles are simple business puzzles, and especially puzzles like a transactional puzzle, okay?
So let's get into one. It sounds really interesting. First of all, I just want to say that, in terms of the state, that the idea and your principle, that you're still actually involved in almost every hiring decision. You want to meet and interview everyone. That says a lot about your organization. That says that you know that your organization is only as good as the people that you bring on, and that you see that every investment you make in your people, in bringing on the best people, lifts up your whole team, but lifts up your customers. And I think that's great. And before we get into your puzzles, because I'm going to ask you some of those puzzles, you know that, right? So, before we get into that though, what I also want to say to our audience is that, this is a similar kind of thing that some other big companies have done. For example, everybody knows of Google, but Larry Page and Sergey Brin, even when Google was very successful, they still wanted to interview, new staff, and they were still involved in that hiring process. So there's something about this that really says someone cares about the culture, and they care about the quality of the people they're bringing on. They're hands-on in that. They see that people are so important to their customers and to the rest of the team. So I think that's wonderful that you do that, AJ. What a wonderful thing to start this section with, that you are personally involved. Even with 175 staff, you're still involved in the hiring. So let's get into these puzzles. This is great. You talked about problem solving, and you said one of the ways that you approach that is through having simple and puzzles. You can kind of figure out how is somebody problem solving. So let's start with just one of those. Let's start with one of those puzzles.
Yeah, definitely. I would love to participate in that. And that's to begin with, and quickly, like during our childhood days, even right. So our parents or grandparents, they ask you questions and try to test you out with a different kind of puzzles. Okay. So one of those puzzles, or many of those puzzles, I always remember things, and I ask those kind of similar questions. So just for an example, many of the times, this is the puzzle which I ask, is like, imagine you have 10 match boxes. Okay, each match box is having 10 matchsticks, and each matchstick is having some weight. Okay, so the weight is 10 gram. Okay, now there is one particular matchbox in which there is this matchstick which is 11 grams instead of 10 grams. So each matchstick in that particular matchbox is of 11 grams. Now you have this weighing machine, that digital one, those fancy ones, in which you can put something and it will show you digital value of that, the weight of that, the product on top of it. So what is the number of times, or what is the minimum number of times you can use that weighing machine, that digital weighing machine, and weigh which particular, and identify which particular matchbox is having that 11 grams of matchstick?
It's a really great, interesting question, right? Because what it does is, first of all, it's almost like a story. And secondly, what's interesting about that question is not just the answer, right? It's actually the process that someone's going to go through to ask you about the question, number one. So for people listening here who want to have great interviews, if you get a puzzle question like this, don't jump right into the answer. So let's give some tips. Let's give some tips really quickly, okay? The first thing that you should do when you get a puzzle question is you should restate the question, okay? This is very important, because instead of rushing to prove that you're the smartest or the fastest to answer the question, what's really being asked is what is your approach to the question, and how are you going to handle customers when they have problems to solve? So first of all, you want to restate the question if you're listening to in getting tips, okay? And then number two is ask some clarifying information. Just to clarify, it's 11 grams per matchstick in one of the boxes. Just to clarify, the goal is to do the fewest number of weighings, right? To figure out, which is the box, right? So, and what is the goal, right? We want to figure out which is the box. So this is the approach that you want to take when you get a puzzle question. And then show your interviewer your process to come to the answer. Because it's okay even if you don't get the right answer. What the interviewer wants to know is, how are you thinking? How are you approaching it? So Now let me go back to AJ. From your point of view, is the way I'm describing it correct? I mean, do you really want to see the thought process, or is it just, you want the fastest answer? What's the balance for you?
You are absolutely correct, Jay. The process, it's all about the journey, right? It's never about the goal, or to say like the end goal. Okay, it's all about how smooth, how good, how understanding the journey should be, and that's what about problem solving. There is always going to be multiple approaches. There is always going to be multiple answers to the same question. Okay, and the one who can best explain it, and it's obviously a presentation skill. And I always tell this, like, what is the difference between a villain and a supervillain? A supervillain is always something with a huge presentation, right? that's all about like the problem solving, especially a puzzle. And definitely a special like specific to this particular puzzle, you can start with reiterating the puzzle and thinking and like talking while you are thinking. So those kind of steps I try to understand and try to see, like, okay, whether I'm not that interested in like what is the exact answer. Okay, what I'm more interested is what is going on in his mind or that particular person's mind, and how he's able to reiterate it.
Yeah, what's really lovely about that too is that because you're giving somebody a small problem, you're really looking for, in a way, the maturity of the person who's like, who's going to balance your needs as a person who has a problem, and really curious about the problem too, right? So we'll talk in another interview. We'll have you back in another interview in the future to talk about mindset, because I think one of the things that makes you really unique is that you have a mindset where you're curious. And from your early story, it's not about right or wrong. It's about what can you learn and what can you share with other people. And I think that mindset is one of the values of Cloud Anaogy, one of the things you look for people that you're hiring. So in this part also, I would like to ask you, let's say that somebody wants to go down the path of being a consultant who's facing with the actual client and working with the client. Okay, what do you think are 2 or 3 things you're looking for somebody who's going to be a project manager working with a client directly? What are the key points that you would be looking for there?
Definitely. So number one and the most important point is staying relevant. So keeping your technology skills, or to say like knowledge about what's there in the market or as a solution, as a CRM, keeping yourself updated 100% of the time. Because many times with this ever-changing like technologies, especially with Salesforce coming up with multiple releases and new features and all, I have seen personally, like even the top-notch consultants also lag behind in knowledge of like, okay, oh, sorry, this was already there, and this particular functionality is out of box in Salesforce CRM. So keeping yourself relevant and updated with the knowledge of what is already provided out of box Salesforce, so that makes you completely ahead of the game. Okay, and second thing is obviously how you are able to present it. Many times I've seen people just talking about it rather than having a small beautiful presentation. Okay, so by presentation, 1 or 2, 3 slides, like how we are going to solve this particular business problem, or how I'm going to take you through this entire journey. So having something to present on to the particular end prospect, client, or whosoever, so that helps you win that engagement, and that helps you towards a very healthy sort of a closure or completion of a particular project when you are having something to present.
Awesome.
One thing that I'm curious in is, so you've mentioned it's really hard to keep up to date, and Salesforce has become so broad, and there are so many clouds now. So what would your advice be to people who are thinking about specializing? So they might specialize, they might have a particular interest in analytics or in field service. What are your thoughts about specialization now in the Salesforce world?
So yeah, I would say keep experimenting. Okay, so that is the only way to drive yourself into all these different kind of questions. Okay, so until and unless you keep experimenting with different kind of domains, different questions, you will definitely need to have asked that question to yourself, like, okay, how this is possible, or how this is being done, and what is the exact current need of that particular business domain. So if you are continuously doing experiment and asking yourself question, that will help you keep yourself updated. Many times people think that they know already too much, and they stop asking questions. So that's a closed system. And what a learned person, or a truly like a person would be able to gain more and more experience with their experimentations and asking questions.
So just to kind of follow up on Martin's question, I think just to and summarize that, number one, I think what you're saying is that when people want to specialize in a particular, field within Salesforce, then the key is to really experiment and see, where your strengths are and where the demand is as well. Never say I've got it, down. It's a dynamic, environment. So really the ongoing learning and best practices are really critical. And before that, you talked a little bit about presenting and organizing your thoughts when you're talking to clients, having a few slides at least, and then you can talk to the client and you show them that you've put the energy into organize before the meeting, really taking good notes, and you learned what their requirements are. That's really a good tip as well. Before we end this segment, AJ, I just want to ask you, from your point of view right now, where do you see is sort of the gap or the hot spot where you feel like, oh, I wish there were more people going down this path or getting this certification? What do you think that is the gap that you're seeing, the demand that people need to fill?
Yeah, definitely. There are so many different things coming up with these particular business domains, especially things like Commerce Cloud certification. Okay, things like Dell Boomi, MuleSoft, basically integrating multiple different systems. So those were always in demand. Those are in demand, and they will always be in demand. Okay, integrating multiple different systems. Okay, and that is where I would suggest every one of you to keep your focus on and stay relevant. So stay relevant and be passionate about what you do. As long as you are passionate about your work, love what you do, and have a crystal clear vision ahead of you, the journey will always be beautiful.
All right, so that's it for this episode of CloudTalent360.com. In the show where we're giving you an insight with Salesforce leaders around the world, their journey, how they got started, their organization today, and their kind of view on having a great career in Salesforce and in CRM. And today our guest, we're very happy to have with us Ajay Dubedi out of Uttar Pradesh, India, the CEO of CloudAnaogy.com. We'll have a link to the website below as well. And we really learned a lot about Cloud Anaogy. It's a hybrid of products and services. It serves different industries, and the fundamental values and mission of Cloud Anaogy really are curiosity about the client's problem. If you have to say in one word, one sentence, what is it that makes Cloud Anaogy special? It's that Cloud Anaogy is very curious about the problem of the client, and then translating that, what AJ shared with us is almost like a puzzle problem. And not to jump to the solution, but to get interested in that problem and really break it down. And so in part 3, AJ shared with us how that translates to his advice for people who want to have a great career. Be curious, keep learning best practices, and share your passion for understanding your customer's problem. And always think about, back to when he was a university student, how is the customer getting value from all this amazing technology? So thank you so much today, AJ, for being on our show and sharing your journey with our audience.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you so much. It's my privilege. So thanks.
That's it. That's it, everybody. And we'll have the show notes below, and make sure you subscribe, and we'll have a series with leaders around the world where you can learn about their journey, their business, and their best advice. I'm Jason. I'm here with Martin Gessner, my co-host and founder also of Cloud Talent, and as well focus on Force. See you next time on CloudTalent360.com.